This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Thank you for listening to this podcast from BFM 89.9. I'm Mira Sivasudi. Now, after 8 years on the air, we're bringing the bigger picture's health and living to you, live, on the ground. A whole day with the experts, debunking myths behind heart disease and diabetes, addressing our love affair with food. And of course, George will be there talking about sperm. So join us at BFM's Health and Living Live 2016 on Saturday, 2nd of April. Go on and register at bfm.my/health.
Good morning, Dodge. Investors now still waiting for the jobs data, inflation data to gauge the Fed outlook. Where are we on this?
Good morning, Abraham. Well, we expect the March non-farm payrolls to come in below the 200,000. We were thinking about 190,000, which is obviously weaker than last month. March unemployment will probably stay the same. We believe that the perception of the Fed is that they feel inflation expectations are stabilizing and hopefully increasing. So overall, it is not an overwhelmingly positive perception at this point, but at least it's not negative.
We saw some Fed presidents actually being very dovish and making some statements in recent weeks. Do you think this is going to reflect the kind of expectation on the non-Fed hike, perhaps?
Well, this is really a very short-term concern. It is being viewed as a Fed rebellion because if the Fed reverses its stance from just a week ago, the markets could be in trouble short term because there is less confidence in what is being communicated from the Fed. So we're going to have to watch if, in fact, this rebellion comes to fruition and that there's a perception that interest rates are going to increase more than what has been communicated.
The week closed last week when we saw S&P, Dow, and also NASDAQ all decline. Do you think there is a clear jitters in the market?
Well, there is some concern about this, not only about what the Fed is communicating or not. Short term, our markets have become overbought. There's been a rotation. We see the rotation continuing to be controlled, and on a rotational basis, we suspect that the market will find some support and that the intermediate-term trend over the next 6 months, we expect, although the market's not perfect, it will remain in a bullish position. So short-term, we're watching very specific levels, 17,120 on the Dow, 2,010 on the S&P, 4690 on the NASDAQ, 1053 on the Russell. For a more meaningful correction, those levels have to be broken. But more important than the actual numbers is the fact that the market is becoming very technical in orientation and that it is being moved up and above and below various areas of support and resistance, and that is beginning to develop into more of a trend and creating the rotation that we're continuing to see.
After weeks of decline, we saw the US dollar registering the 6th straight gain day against major currencies. Do you think this ties in with the expectation that the Fed may focus on some economic corrections on their macro front?
Yes, I think the Fed has the perception that there's a good pace of job growth, there's going to be stronger inflation, and there's a bottoming out of manufacturing sector sentiment. And so I suspect that we will continue to see the dollar have a gain against other major currencies, not only because of what is happening in the U.S., Abraham, but also the perception of potential weakness in the other currencies.
Focusing a little bit on the information technology sector, we saw that Microsoft is in early talks with Yahoo. How does this bid well with some other IT companies, including like Synnex Corporation, where they will report their earnings this week? Do you think this is a positive signal for the sector?
Well, we're going to have to see. Synnex, that you mentioned, that's going to report after the close on Monday. Obviously, it's consumer electronics as wholesaler. It's been downgraded recently to hold across several firms, and it could disappoint relatively high expectations. But what we've seen is on Friday there was some support coming in, and it's holding above its longer-term support at around $90, $91. So it will have to have a quite disappointing results in order for it to break. Micron Technology is another one we're going to see. Expectations reflect the potential for some really bad numbers based on its levered reliance on personal computing and the weak DRAM prices. But most brokerage firms are largely supporting it, And so we're going to see there is some support at the round number of $10. Friday it closed at $10.50. It has some fairly significant resistance areas above it, so we hope to see it hold the $10 level. The best that we're seeing now is Carnival Cruise, which reports early at 10 a.m. on Wednesday morning. The share has been down 10% this year, but we suspect it's going to benefit from Cuba opening, an improving job market, low oil prices. So there's some fairly significant favored factors that should help the perception of its earnings.
You're still here. Good. Now, if you're listening to this podcast while on the treadmill, you're already off to a good start. If you're not, don't forget to join us at BFM's Health and Living Live 2016 on the 2nd of April. Find out how you can live a better, healthier life. Go on and register at bfm.my/health.
Let's jump into Europe right now. We saw that yen and euro has weakened. Do you think this is in rough expectations of how the market will behave this week?
Probably. With regard to the yen, Japan is still struggling to generate inflation after 3 years of its policy assault on low growth and deflation. Its monetary stimulus has been partly counteracted by its fiscal policy of raising sales tax to cover increasing debt, and it plans to do that again next year. So I suspect that the yen is going to continue to act and behave in the same manner because there's very little momentum to change. With regard to euro did slip this past week, but that was caused by the Brussels Islamic State attacks. We suspect that it will continue to weaken versus the dollar. What we're really going to be watching is the perception of how strong the U.S. dollar can be in the short term relative to the behavior of both the euro and the yen.
Do you think these terror attacks can push oil prices up, at least in the short term?
There seems to be a differentiation between the human and emotional reaction that is obviously devastating versus the perception of how much an Islamic attack such as what we had will affect market over the longer term. And what we're seeing is a shortening of the impact of terrorist attacks. And that perhaps is being buttressed by how Europe is behaving, how Brussels is behaving, and how some of the terrorists have been captured, and there's a more positive impact relative to the market. So we suspect that the short-term nature of that will not affect the euro dollar relative to the U.S. dollar, and we suspect that what will more govern the level of the euro dollar is the strength in the U.S.
With Brexit actually placing fears around markets, we saw the British pound registering lower, in fact, the lowest in 15-month decline against the euro. Do you think these kind of market expectations will just exacerbate as the Brexit plan comes closer?
Yes, it's really interesting. The market fears over the prospect of Brexit have actually sharpened despite really no meaningful shift in opinion polls towards the Leave campaign. This week, there was a 2.5% drop, as you were talking about. The price of hedging against the fall of the pound is rising sharply, surpassing similar shifts ahead of last year's UK general election and before Scotland's 2014 independence referendum. So it's being taken more seriously, and we still have 3 months before the actual referendum. So I suspect that the market fears over the prospect of Brexit will continue to sharpen and be in focus, and that there will be very little to counteract that until the actual referendum.
Have a great week ahead, Dodge. That was Dodge Dorland, the Chief Investment Officer of Landor and Fuest Capital Managers in New York.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.